seminars for Saturday and Sunday. So you're going to get to interact with some of the best names in the sport, and no better way to start it off with Kellogg's Pop-tarts pro, Greg Bohannan. He's in his 7th season fishing the FLW Tour. He's 3 tournament wins, 14 top 10 finishes, and over $500,000 in career earnings. So I'd like to welcome to the Fox 33 seminar stage, Greg Bohannan.
Hey guys, how y'all doing today? Y'all, when I left this morning, I felt like I needed to put a jacket on almost. My wife said it's 48 degrees this morning in Arkansas, so we're really enjoying this fall-like weather. I expected when I came to Shreveport, when I was told we're going to be in Shreveport for a championship, when I was just picturing sweltering temperatures and 100 degrees. And I just got down here last night, and man, I'm really surprised that it's down here. All across the southeast this year, and I kind of feel bad talking about this, we've had floods. And we've had lots of rain, and discussing with some of you guys before we got started, parts of Texas is really dry, and a lot of lakes are low. But, a lot of our tournaments this year, we had high water. And so when I was asked to do a seminar, I kind of wanted to talk about flipping, because it seemed like a lot of our tournaments this year, when you have high water in the spring, it revolves around a flipping device. And so I thought I'd talk a little about flipping today on kind of how I like to do it, and how some of these other guys like to do it out here. I know a lot of fish are being caught on the Red River flipping right now. I know I hear Randall Tharp was leading yesterday, was catching some of his on a frog, some of them were flipping. And I watched Mark Rose last night he's a good personal friend of mine. I watched him on the internet last night. He was flipping some around some lily pads. So I thought I would talk about flipping and kind of talk about the type of structure I like to target, kind of my setup, line, rod, reel, speed of the reel, and all that. And we'll kind of go through everything. And then when I get through it there at the end, I'm just going to talk about 20 minutes here. And then when I get through at the end, we'll do questions and answers. Anything at all y'all want to see, or if you want to check out my rod and reel, or kind of the baits I got on here, and talk about maybe some of the baits you guys like to flip, and kind of talk about the ins and outs of it. This year we were at, I don't know if you guys saw the TV show from Grand Lake, Jason Christie won. Had a pretty good event there. I think it was like 23rd. There was a couple like 9 ounces. But, it was dominated by flippers. So that was a flipper's dream this year. And I kind of like to fish shallow and pitch at something I can see. And I'm sure some of you guys being from here. Who is from this area that's here? Where is it? You guys are from Arkansas. Where's everybody else from? Texas? Arkansas? What Arkansas? Hot Spring? Cool. That's cool there. What about you guys? Russellville. That's where I went to college at. I'm a former Arkansas Tech Wonder Boy. I think that's the only time we made ESPNs, when they announced one time the top 10 worst mascot names ever. And I think we made that one time as a Wonder Boy. So I was proud to be a Wonder Boy, though. In our conference, we had the UAM Mule Riders. We had our Monticello Bowl Eagles. We had quite a conference there when some different names there. But anyway, that tournament at Grand Lake, like I said, it was a flipper's dream, and there's tons of willow bushes there. And if you get a chance to check out that show, you can watch them live you can replay them on the web, on the FLW website. So check it out if you want to see some really good flipping action. That Grand Lake turned into the water came up. It was super flooded when we got there at Grand Lake. And I'm going to use it as a good example of when you go into practice and you really like to flip, which I do. We went into that tournament and it was really flooded. It was about 5 feet flooded, so 5 feet above normal pool. And so what happened, there's tons of willow bushes there, there's tons of buckbushes. My first couple of days of practice, I just knew we were going to catch a flipping. And both days, the first 2 days of practice, I didn't really get bit that good, but the water was extremely high. And what the problem was is a lot of times when you want to target flipping fish, when it's really flooded, they're hard to get to. It seems like that largemouth, especially when you target largemouth, he wants to get absolutely as shallow as he can get. And so what happened there at Grand Lake was it was extremely flooded. The first couple of days of practice, I kept trying to push my way into places, and the flipping bite was just okay. But they started pulling some water out of the lake, and so when the tournament time got there, it was just primo. So what happened? That water started to fall a little bit. I think it fell a couple inches. But on our off day there, and so the fish started to migrate to the outside of those bushes. So it really made a good tournament. And that's what happens a lot of times when you get extremely flooded conditions. You want to try to find places you can get to the bank. The first day of the tournament, I was targeting kind of some swimming areas, some camping areas. So they were areas that had a lot of brush. Would be right down from it. I would see just tons and tons of buck bushes and flooded willow bushes, and there were areas you couldn't get all the way to the bank. But I come down these little sections where it opened up a little bit, and all of a sudden I could get to the bank. I could get all the way to the bank, and so I could target some more sparse stuff. It seemed like when you get into really, really flooded conditions, if you'll target the sparse stuff, that seems to be something where your better fish are. And I remember flipping a big section right through there, and I caught like one or two, and I got down there where it started to get a little more sparse, and I started catching almost every bush had a fish in it. So it was really fun. That's kind of the two things that we were targeting in that particular tournament was willow bushes and buck bushes. Out here on the river, you guys fish this river, I'm sure you can target lily pads, you can target wood, or about anything up and down that river. And anytime you have that type of condition where you have something to pitch at, flipping's a really good technique. We'll talk about my setup here. Flipping is usually what we call hand-to-hand combat. So you want something, you want a rod that's fairly heavy. This is actually a Denali 7.6 heavy, extra heavy flipping stick. It's got a little bit of a tip on it. You want a little bit of a tip on your rod because when you want to pitch, you kind of want to load that rod up a little bit. You want a little give to it when you're pitching. So it's got a little bit of a tip on it, but when you set the hook, it stops that bend high up on the rod and gives you an extreme amount of power. So choose a rod that's extremely heavy, that's got a little bit of tip, and it's got a lot of power when you get the fish in the boat. I've got 20-pound fluorocarbon. I like to pitch fluorocarbon. And 20 pounds is about as low as I would ever go. I know these guys flipping out on the river, they're probably flipping 20 to 25-pound fluorocarbon. Some guys are flipping braid. I prefer fluorocarbon when I'm pitching in bushes, when I'm flipping willow bushes. When you get into grass situations like in Florida, anywhere in Florida, anywhere Okeechobee or Gunnersville, it's got a lot of vegetation. I always go to braid then. And the main reason that is there's zero stretch on that braid, and it cuts the vegetation. That's probably the number one thing that braid has going for it when you're flipping the vegetation is when you get that big fish, you get a 6-pounder down there, say in a millful mat or something, and that braid, when you set the hook and it goes to run, it likes to cut through that grass and get your fish out of there. So I usually choose fluorocarbon on bushes and then braid on any type of vegetation. Our reel, usually I use the high-speed reel. This is a 7-to-1 Apple Garcia reel. I like to have a fast reel because when you get that bite, when you get a bite down in something, usually when you're flipping down in something, when you feel the bite, you want to get the fish's head coming up out of that as fast as you can. I heard a lot of guys talk over Grand Lake about they lost a lot of fish, and I lost a couple of really key fish. You get a bite down inside that bush, and as soon as you get that bite, I've had people ask me that when you're flipping into a bush, and I feel a bite, when do I set the hook? And absolutely, as soon as you feel that bite, set the hook, get his head coming up out of the bush, or out of whatever you're flipping, and get him out into the open water, and I think your chances of landing are a lot better. I have about a 6-pounder in that particular tournament, and I set the hook, and he got his head turned down in the bush, and I couldn't get him out for a second. He kind of waddled around, and I could see him down there. I was trying to get the boat over there, and he'd come off. So I think it's extremely important to have heavy line, a rod that you can power the fish out with, and then a high-speed reel to take up that slack real quick and get that fish coming out of the bush. Baits are pretty simple for me. This is a Berkeley pit boss. I know a beaver style bait has been real popular. I usually want something. I like to pitch a brush hog a lot or a creature type bait if I'm in more open water, like if I'm pitching at the base of a single tree, a base of a laying log, where you don't have a lot of things to get hung up on. I like a creature style bait. You pitch it down there, it's got all kinds of things flipping around on it. And I think that attracts you a few more bites. Now, when you get into some bushes or some, especially willow bushes, if you're flipped in willow bushes, things want to hang up on it. So I like something that's fairly slender, like a beaver style bait. This is kind of what this is designed after. But this has got some little kicking legs. And so, when you pitch it down in that bush or whatever, it's actually got a little action as it goes down in there. When you hop it, it's got a little action to it. But it's not enough that it's going to get hung up on stuff when you go to flip it. So I try to target something that will slide in and out of that bush pretty easy. As far as sprays and attractants, I've talked to guys that really like to put some kind of spray on there. I like to put some on mine, but I like it more because it makes it slick. When you're flipping into a tree or something, it slides through there real easy. A lot of times if you put some attractant on it, it'll slide down through there real easy, make it a little more efficient. Weight-wise, I think this is a half-ounce sinker when I'm fishing bushes or something like that, or willow bushes. Or a lot of times when I'm flipping logs, single lay-down log, I usually like to flip at least a 3/8-ounce sinker. I think this is actually a half-ounce sinker. I like to pitch something that will go to the bottom quick and where I can get it out of there quick. This has actually got, this particular setup, I've got a bobber stop on there. That's just to hold that sinker down against the bait. I put one bobber stop on the top. I like to put a bobber stop, another one on right below the sinker. That way I feel like that protects my knot some. It's just something I started doing a couple years ago. When you got that big sinker sitting on top of that, I just think that rubber sitting on top of that knot, to me, I think it protects that knot some. Sometimes if the water's a little bit off color, I'll take and put a little bead right in between your bottom bobber stop and your sinker. And when you pitch it in that bush, you can kind of shake it, and it gives you a little action, or it gives you a little noise on there. So anytime the water's colored up just a little bit, I like to put a little sound in there. Especially when I was over at Grand this year, we were flipping over there, the water's a little bit stained. I put just a clear glass bead there. You can actually hear it when you flip it in that bush. I'd shake it a couple times, and I can hear it clicking, and I think it'll get you a bite or two more. When you get on down to the hook that I use, this is actually, I'm not sponsored by Gamakatsu or anything, but this is actually a Gamakatsu flipping hook. It's a 4/0 hook. It's a straight shank hook, and I've learned over the years that if I've stayed away from the one that's got a bend in the top, like an offset shank worm hook. That's what I used to flip, but ever since they come out with this straight shank hook, used to we'd have to cut some little electrical tubing up across the top and melt it on there to make a keeper out of it, but now they've got a really nice keeper on it. I think that straight shank hook will catch you more fish. About every one of the fish, when I set the hook, it's hooked right in the top of the mouth. And I think your hookup ratio on a straight shank hook is actually better. We'll slide this back down here. And you can see when it sets up in there, it sets at a very good angle. When the fish bites on it, it seems like you cut a lot on right in the top of the mouth. And that straight shank hook, I think that's an important part for your flipping. I think if you notice, if you look at the guys' boats that are coming out, probably everybody out there in this tournament has probably got a flipping bait tied on. And I bet you 90% of them have a straight shank hook on. So that's something that's helped us over the last couple of years. That's something that's fairly new in the last few years, and it's really been a good part of it. You're talking about speed. That kind of varies. A lot of times around the spawn, let me start over. When I'm flipping, normally if I'm flipping a lay down log, or if I'm flipping a bush, or whatever target I'm coming to, whether that be a dock. That's one of the reasons I talk about using a half-ounce sinker. I like to pitch it in there real quick. I usually make one, probably let it go to the bottom, hop it once, sometimes twice, and then I pitch to the next target. I like to do what you probably call it speed flipping. I want to cover as many targets as I can, because you guys that flip very much know that about half the time your bite, when it originally falls down that bush or originally falls right down beside that log, that's probably when half the time, or maybe 75% of the time, that's when your bite actually occurs, is on that initial fall. And so you can kind of play with it when you're out there to see, if it let me go to the bottom and hop it once, or twice, but I rarely hop it more than twice, and I pull it out and go to the next target. The only time I deviate from that probably is around the spawn, because a lot of times when you're flipping, whatever it be, around a lay down or whatever, during the spawn, a lot of times they lack something. You guys know when you're sight fishing, you have to work that fish. Kind of picture that in the springtime, because when you're flipping around the spawn and you really can't see that bed, or you really can't see what's at the bottom of it, sometimes it may take a few more hops to make that fish bite. So that would probably be the only time I would deviate from about 2 hops is around that spawn time. But I like to pitch it down in there if I'm pitching docks. I like to pitch it to the base of that pole, that dock, hop it twice, and try to work it as fast as I can. My theory is the more times I can get it in and out of stuff, the more bites I'm going to get. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of of how I like to flip and kind of my setup. I think you'll probably see when you watch this tournament right here back on TV. I think we'll see a lot of folks, a lot of fish being caught flipping. Anytime you're on a river system, that's a dominant pattern. I think all time of the year, and so that's one of the reasons I chose to talk about flipping today, and to see if you guys had any more questions. If you might have got any questions about the setup, we got it.
On the reel, what's your tension adjustment? Or I have a tendency, I'm new at it.
Okay.
And I get a lot of backlash.
Uh-huh.
Now, whenever I'm casting normally, the adjustment on the side, it slowly will fall. Okay. Is that proper setup?
This is going to fall really, really fast. If you don't put your thumb back on it, it's going to back out a little bit. And it's almost a free spool, and because you want it to flow off there real easy and real fast. You also want it to go into the water as soft as you can a lot of times. And if you have the tension on the reel, it tends to ride up on it and make a big splash down. So mine is extremely loose. You can see how fast it falls to the bottom. And it's just something you have to work through during the day.
You stop it when you...
I stop it with my thumb about every time. And that way it goes. It's real. It goes off fast. It goes in the water smooth. Light splash, but it's extremely loose. Now the drag, and that brings me to another point. The drag is cranked down just about as tight as I can. I'm throwing, this is 20-pound fluorocarbon. A lot of times I'm really thick stuff. I throw 25-pound fluorocarbon. Anytime around vegetation, I'm throwing heavy braid, usually 65-pound braid. And so I crank the drag down absolutely as tight as I can get it. Because, literally, I don't get to catch a lot of 10-pounders. Where I live, we don't have too many of them. But, you're probably not going to break 25-pound tests on a bass out there. Unless it straight lines away from you or something. That way, if I do get a really, really big bass on, say I got a 6-pounder on, I did catch one of those grand this year. I caught an 8-pounder at Pickwick this year. If I do get a really, really big fish on, that drag's tightened all the way down, you get him up beside the boat, I'll free spool him, and play him just by free spooling the fish with my thumb. But I think that tight drag is very important to get a really good, clean hook set on that fish when you get your original bite.
My second question is, are you tying a specific knot to that straight shank to improve your hook set? I've talked with a couple guys and they said that they like tying a snell. I
tie snell anytime I'm throwing braid. What that'll do, when you snell that when you're throwing braid, when you pull down on that sinker, that hook immediately flips up.
Right.
That puts that bait, when that fish bites that big sinker. A lot of times when you're snelling, you're throwing an ounce and a half sinker like down in Florida or down in Guntersville or something. And when you have that big sinker on the front, when you set the hook, it tends to blow the fish's mouth open. And when you snell hook that, it seems to catch them right at the top of their mouth real good. I just tie a Palomar knot. I get it really wet when I pull it down. I tie a Palomar knot anytime I'm throwing a fluorocarbon on a straight shank hook. Good question. What's that now? Yeah. I tie a Palomar on everything. This is what I've always done. I don't break any fish off. I've had people ask me about that. I just think it's important to get it really wet when you do it and get it cinched down. When you're tying that Palomar knot, really cinch it down pretty tight where it doesn't have any give to it when you set the hook. This is, I'm throwing Torrey now, and I really like it. Really like it. Good question. Yes, sir.
Do you, other than the bait or running, why do you determine what size hook you're going to use?
Yeah, that's a good question. I try to get that hook to where it's going to set in the base of that, whether it be a beaver or this is a pit ball. So I want that hook to set somewhere toward the bottom of it right here. If I'm throwing a big brush hog type bait, big creature bait, I'll go to a 5/0, maybe even a 6/0. But I want that hook to sit down there toward the end of the bait. So say that fish does come up there, if you hop it, he comes there and grabs the tip of it. He's still getting the point of that hook. What you don't want is a big old bait, and then your hook point sitting up here toward the top of the bait somewhere. It seems like it needs to be down there toward the bottom of it. But I normally throw a 4 on these beaver style bait, a 4/0 hook, and then I normally throw a 5 on a brush hog type bait. And I'm pretty simple. I don't throw too many different type crazy baits. If I'm flipping, I'm throwing I'm throwing a beaver, or I'm throwing this pit boss or a creature bait. That's about the only three things I flip. You know, color-wise, I'm pretty simple. I heard Dave Dudley talk about that. You know, I don't think you need a whole bunch of colors in your box. If it's clear, I throw green pumpkin. If it's a little bit of stain, I throw green pumpkin with red metal flake in it. And if it's stained, I throw black and blue. That's simple. I mean, that's, you know, at Pickwick this year, I was catching flipping and never start, and I was running some different parts of the lake, and I had a green pumpkin and a black and blue, and I just alternated back and forth. And sometimes during the day, those fish will tell you which bait they want. Even the clear water fish, sometimes they like that black and blue bait pretty good. Good questions. Anybody else?
When you mentioned you make it look effortless, how important is it to practice to learn your fish?
Oh, I think it's really important, and it's really something you can do about anywhere. I used to do it in my dorm room in college when I should have been studying for a test. I was pitching a cup down the hall, you know, and so you can do it about anywhere in your house, and I think it's really important. When you see something like Dave Lefever's extremely good caster, you know, and what you'll do, you'll start getting into areas where all of a sudden you got 100 boats in this tournament. Say it's a dock type tournament, you know, and all of a sudden everybody's hitting those outside poles. You know, it's important to be able to reach to get back under that dock, you know, and the better and more accurate you are, you know, the more bites you're going to get. I've seen that happen a lot. Is being an accurate pitcher is extremely important. I've heard a lot of guys talk about, you know, if you miss your target by a foot, you know, that bait may fall over here. The fish may see it, but he don't want to go over there and get it. But if you put it on his nose, all of a sudden you're trying to pitch right beside that pole, you know, and it's kind of like us. If you put a hamburger right here, I'm probably going to eat it. You know, but if I'm going to walk over, I may not want it. I may not be hungry right now. But when you put it right in front of their nose, sometimes they bite and they don't want to bite. And so accuracy is extremely important. Who else have one? You know, I used to a lot, and I probably should more. You know, Danny Breyer flips it to a lot, and I think that's a great bait. This pit boss, it came out a few years ago, and I like it. Ever since it came out, I've really been a big fan of it, just because it's compact, it's small, but it's got a lot of action. When you hop it up, the legs will really kick on it, and so to me, it's kind of like it too. But I don't flip it through that much, but I know guys that do. That's kind of their confidence bait. And so there are probably times when in a pressure situation that a tube may get you a few more bites. Yes, sir.
One other thing I mentioned, Danny Breyer, I watched him when he flipped a lot of times, he pulled back on afterwards. With your meaning, so I, like him, I keep in mind kind of catch on or slow ball sometimes that.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times you'll see guys do that. Like if I pitch, say I'm flipping, most times you're flipping 2 foot, 3 foot of water. Sometimes you may be flipping, say you're flipping up beside a dock and 6 foot there. You know, and so you want that bait to fall straight down in there. So you'll feed a little line, so when it's falling, it doesn't fall away from the target. When you're feeding that line, it falls straight down.
With you keeping yours that low, do you need
I do sometimes. You know, just to be sure. Because when that line starts falling, you know, it's going to have a little drag on it. So I feel like if you give it a little bit, it's going to fall straight down in there. Now, if I'm flipping a target, if I'm flipping a bush, you know, whatever, I just flip it down there and I just hold it and let it go to the bottom. You know, the only time I would feed it line is if I'm in 4, 5, 6 feet of water. Usually you're in 2 or 3 feet where it's on the bottom, you know, right down. So I hop once or twice and I reel it in and, you know, and I pitch it to the next one. So, that's a good question. Anybody else? Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out. You guys enjoy the show. Check out all our sponsor booths. You know, one thing I did not mention, you know, I wear Typhoon's Optics, and it's extremely good sunglasses. You guys check out their booth. You know, a lot of times when we're trying to target stuff just under the surface, you know, I think a good pair of sunglasses is really important. So you guys check out our booth over Typhoon. So appreciate you guys very much.
Thank you very much, Greg Bohannan. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have another seminar at 2 o'clock with Twix Pro Jonathan Newton. But stay tuned and look at your event guides for more information. Enjoy the show.
It'll be 30 minutes before the next one.
Yes, sir, at 2 o'clock.
And what's his seminar going to be on?
I don't know.